We're still about 3 months away from football, but we're still going to give you 10 to 15 bold predictions today. Of course, drop your bold predictions in the comments and let us know what you think. But outside of that, drop a like, subscribe to the channel. Amir, you're joining the show, and I'm not going to waste any time. Let's get into your first bold prediction. There's some rumors going around about the quarterback situation there in Miami, but what is your prediction here for Dak Prescott?
So yeah, so my prediction, going into this draft, we all kind of expected Miami to push towards getting a quarterback. A guy like Penix later on, a guy like Bo Nix later on, and surprisingly, those guys ended up getting picked up. And
Yeah.
so, I think for Miami, seeing the way Tua played this past year, I think going into this next year, I can very much see Tua taking another step back seeing the Dolphins struggle a lot and them realizing like, hey, we got this guy at quarterback and we obviously can't get over the hump with them. And so, my prediction is that, Tua's going to, pretty much play his way out of Miami. He's going to struggle a lot. They're going to end up moving on from him because as of right now, I mean, they have nobody else to replace him in case he was to play terrible. And so
Yeah.
I think he's going to be up out of there. And I think Dak Prescott, a guy in Dallas whose contract is going to be up. I think everything is too perfect for him, to pretty much not stay in Dallas because Dallas is obviously falling apart. And so I think, it leaves him for the perfect chance to, go up Mike McDaniel, Tyreek, Jalen Waddle, team up with those guys to go to Miami.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, again, right now the rumors are that Tua is going to work on an extension, but I guess you're predicting that they don't work anything out, and Tua again plays his way out of Miami. My first bold prediction. Let me start by saying that we're gonna have history. We're gonna have the first ever 2,000-yard receiver. Last year, I predicted it was gonna be Tyreek Hill. I was pretty close to it. If Tyreek Hill didn't get hurt for a stretch of time, I think Tyreek Hill would have been the first ever 2,000-yard receiver. This year, though, I'm going to make that same prediction, but for Jamar Chase. We have no idea what's going on with T. Higgins. He could be traded today, tomorrow, week 8 in the middle of the season. But whether if he's traded or not, I think this year we're going to see Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow come back with a vengeance, and they're going to play like they did 2 years ago when both of them were lighting teams on fire. So I think Jamar Chase will be the first ever receiver to break that 2,000-yard mark for a single season. So that is my first bold prediction. Of course, big believer in this Bengals team. And number two, what is your bold predictions? Of course, we see Pat Mahomes with some familiar jewelry in his hands.
Yeah, so my prediction, I was really looking at, KC's team this year, looking at the structure of the AFC and the NFC, I was really looking at, how they were still able to win that championship last year with that terrible roster. And, I'm thinking about it, I'm looking, I'm like, okay, so there's 9 teams that went back to back in NFL history. The Chiefs is one of them, these past 2 years. And I'm like, I think right now we're obviously in Mahomes' era, and I think we're witnessing eventually who's going to be the greatest, person to ever touch a football. And so I generally think, this year is going to be the first three-peat in NFL history. And it sounds crazy, and it's so tough to do because everything has to be right. But I mean, the Chiefs only gotten better. The defense only gotten better. The offense only gotten better. You only added more speed around Mahomes, which is obviously scary. You guys, there Pacheco was going to come back in his third year and be great. You got Rashee Rice, obviously, is dealing with some stuff, but he's coming back in year 2, going to be right. And the stuff that's going on is going to have a chip on his shoulder. You bring in Hollywood, Xavier Worthy. I think right now everything's perfectly for the Chiefs to have a three-peat.
No, absolutely. Again, last year we said if Mahomes can win it with this roster, it's hard to not say he's not only the best player in the world, but already a top 2 to top 3 quarterback of all time. And then they overload this roster and they only get better. Amir, that's
Yep,
I can
that's
definitely
scary.
see that happening. For my second bold prediction, we're going to talk about a young gun. Maybe it's my Gator bias, and you'll see a couple Gators here on my list today. But my bias, or I guess my prediction is that Anthony Richardson is going to lead the Colts to the playoffs, but he's going to have that great of a season where he receives MVP votes. I think he's going to finish top 5 in the MVP voting, whether if it's in the passing game, the receiving game. He has all the pieces around him to dominate. And again, he doesn't need to be Superman. He doesn't need to be, I guess, Cam Newton in his first year in Carolina, where he did everything. He just needs to do the bare minimum. And I think statistically, he can have a great season, especially with that offensive line and the weapons that they brought in around him. So Anthony Richardson is going to receive MVP votes in his first full year as an
Mm-hmm.
NFL starter. That's scary to think about. And number three, we both had a combination of things here for the New York Jets. If you watched last week's video, we did our playoff predictions. So if you missed that, go check it out. But spoiler alert, we both were very high on the New York Jets. To me, I think not only can they win their division, but they finish as a top 2 seed in the AFC. Amir, I'll let you take the floor here as we have Aaron Rodgers on the screen for a reason.
Yeah, I'm genuinely surprised to see, how many casual fans are writing the Jets off. They're looking at Aaron Rodgers' age, looking at his injury last year, but I'm looking at the roster construction. I'm like, man, this is literally the perfect team for somebody to come back from an injury to. And I'm looking at the defense. The defense is obviously elite. The passing defense I think was top 3 in the league last year.
Yeah.
Up front they're dominant. I mean, in my opinion, they have the best cornerback duo in the league with Reed and Sauce. Offensively, you go ahead and boost this offense up, the offensive line. And so I'm looking at that team. My prediction is that Aaron Rodgers is not only going to win a comeback player of the year, but they're also going to win a division, over Buffalo, over the Dolphins. And that's huge because obviously, there's so many people that still, putting Josh Allen, high, putting Tua high, but this Jets team is way too stacked for me not to put them that high.
Again, I've said it for probably every single episode the last month that we've done together. My only worry about this team is Robert Saleh because he hasn't been there as a head coach. He hasn't been in those big time games, making those big decisions. He hasn't been there. But again, the roster's there, and I have no doubt that Aaron Rodgers is gonna come back to form. And Amir, I mean, a bad season for Aaron Rodgers is 30 touchdowns and 5 interceptions. Or I guess we'll say 7 interceptions. That's a bad year for Aaron Rodgers. I just want him to have an okay year, and I think this Jets team is going to be able to compete for a title. Let's talk about some rookies, though. We talked about some veterans there, especially in New York and on that team. But let's switch sides. Let's talk about some rookies. My bold prediction is that Laiatu Latu, if you've been a fan of this channel, I've been praising this guy for months now. I believe, of course, first defensive player off the board there in this past draft, goes to the Indianapolis Colts. And I think not only is he going to be the best defensive player on this line, I think he's going to set a record. I think Laiatu Latu will set the new rookie sack record, which was previously held by Javon Curse back in the 90s. I think Laiatu Latu is going to have at least 15 sacks in his rookie season and, of course, take home Defensive Rookie of the Year. I think, next to DeForest Buckner, who takes up double teams every single play, Laiatu is going to have one-on-ones, and he's the most polished pass rusher in the class. I think he has an instant impact on this Indianapolis Colts defense, and he gets at least 15 sacks in his first career season. By the way, Amir, Javon Curse, when he set that record, I looked at his stats. Every single year after his rookie year, his sack statistics went down every single year. Laiatu Latu, again, hopefully that doesn't happen for him because I'm a big fan of him. But you want to talk about a rookie here, but on the offensive side of the ball, maybe the best player in the draft class, depending on who you ask. What is your bold prediction here for one of the rookies in 2024?
Yes, I'm talking about Marvin Harrison Jr. And in my opinion, him and Neighbors are like 1A, 1B. It's really close, but I believe Marvin Harrison is in a perfect position to really feast this first year in. And so, I'm predicting, for him to break the rookie receiving yards record and the reception yard record, it sounds pretty crazy, but I mean, in reality, Kyler Murray has nobody to throw the ball to. And so, I'm looking at him right now. I'm looking at how Pua's year was last year and how Cooper Kupp was hurt and how Pua got completely fed his first games in the league. And I think he had, it was 1,486 yards on 105 receptions, and he broke both records. And so, I'm expecting Marvin Harrison to get around 120 receptions, 125 receptions, and get completely fed to this year because Kyler has nobody to throw the ball to.
Yeah, my only worry with that, Amir, is because recently, of course, if you're a fan of the channel, this week here, we started fantasy football back up here on the channel, and I did some quarterback rankings for fantasy football, of course, and I wanted to go back and watch that Cardinals offense. If you go back and watch those games back when Kyler Murray came back, they were actually a running offense. So I'm interested to see if this team comes back and runs the football, and of course rely on the run, and then that will open up play action down the field. I'm interested to see if they still go with the run because they got a lot of offensive linemen and they got a lot of blocking tight ends in the NFL draft, and they also drafted Trey Benson. Amir, Marvin Harrison, definitely, to me, clear number one wide receiver in the class. But I'm interested to see and how this offense operates. I think they might be a running offense just like the LA Chargers. But two talented rookies, to me, two top 5 talented rookies in this class as far as talent. These guys are that good. Moving over to you here, we have another rookie, maybe the most, I guess, talked about rookie. I guess no doubt the most talked about rookie. I mean, self-proclaimed, maybe the most talented prospect we've seen since Andrew Luck or Trevor Lawrence. I'll give you the floor here. What is your take here about Caleb Williams here in 2024?
So, for Caleb, man, this has to be arguably the best situation a rookie quarterback has came into in, man, maybe history. I mean, this is literally perfect for him. For him to get drafted number one and have a perfect team around him, an elite defense, an absolutely great receiving core. The Bears do a great job of going ahead and get more receivers, a solid O-line. And so, I'm pretty predicting him, not only break pretty much every Bears record, which is, I think the passing yards record is around 2,200 yards. I want
Which
to say
is
the touchdown
terrible.
record is around like 20 touchdowns, so that's going to be easy. And
That's
so,
terrible. Like if you think about that,
exactly.
Amir, like if you think about that, I think if you put Zach Wilson on this team, like Zach Wilson might actually be able to set a record just because
Right.
he flings the ball down the field. But I'm sorry to cut you off. Go ahead.
Right. Not seriously. It's really terrible. And I'm looking at his records and I'm like, man, this is going to be easy for him as long as he stays healthy. And so, I wasn't going to go overboard and say, he's going to go ahead and break the passing yards records. I think it's around 4,400 yards by Andrew Luck, which is crazy for a rookie quarterback to get to.
Justin
But
Herbert has it, but go ahead.
oh, you get it's Herbert or Luck, 1 to 2. But
Yeah.
I think the passing TDs record is 31. I think he'll break that. That's going to be closer. But I think he's going to get around 32 to 35 touchdowns.
I mean,
I also think he's going to lead the Bears to the playoffs. And it sounds crazy because the NFC is a lot more stacked this year. You got teams like Green Bay who's getting better, obviously, and I think he can lead them to that lower seed over teams like Green Bay.
Yeah, no, we talked about that last week, of course, too. But I mean, no doubt with the weapons he has around him. I mean, who's the worst
Yeah,
starting weapon that he has on that offense? I mean, DeAndre Swift, is that the worst weapon that you have? Because you have
yeah,
Cole Kmet, you have all these talented receivers. Roma Dunze, you just draft, who's my favorite receiver in the class. Not the best, but my favorite receiver in the class. He goes to Chicago. For such a storied franchise and a decorated franchise to be around for as long as they have and to have as subpar passing numbers that they've had, it's kind of ridiculous that Caleb Williams could just play okay in his rookie year. We can look at it as that's a down season, and he still can set multiple Chicago Bear records. It's just crazy how long they've been around and how lack of a quarterback play that they've had. For me, we're going to talk about some veteran quarterbacks. And again, the old quarterback for the Chicago Bears was Justin Fields. He's now in Pittsburgh, of course, via trade. Now Pittsburgh has this two-headed monster of Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. That sets up an interesting dynamic in its own right. How do they use them? Who's the true starter? Does Justin Fields eventually get to be the starter for this team down the line? A lot of questions for Pittsburgh, but Amir, to me, again, no doubt, I think they're still going to be a 9 to 10 win football team because of their defense. But I don't think Russell Wilson or Justin Fields are the answer. I think after next year, they're still going to be in the market looking for maybe a Shador Sanders, a Carson Beck, maybe trying to make that big move up. But I don't think either of these guys in Pittsburgh are going to be the answer for Pittsburgh going forward. I said their city name about 10 times in that ramble there. But again, I don't think either of these guys are it. I think they're going to be in the market yet again in 2024. And who would have thought Big Ben was that valuable of a quarterback where after he left, they have not been able to find a viable replacement for their franchise going forward. At number 6, Garrett Wilson. You have him, of course, as your 6th bold prediction. What is that bold prediction for number 17? Of course, the former Buckeye, excuse me.
Yeah, so I have Garrett Wilson being an All-Pro this year. Whether it's first or second team, and seeing this guy get 1,000+ yards receiving the past 2 years with having all these different quarterback changes. I mean, having Zach Wilson at quarterback, Darnold, and all those other guys or whatever. And, seeing this guy, show so many flashes and so much potential. The fact that he's getting Aaron Rodgers back, absolute upgrade. And seeing how Aaron Rodgers completely, boosted up Tay Adams' career, helped him develop. I think this is a perfect year for him to absolutely go off and go crazy. Perfect year.
No, absolutely. I guess I want your thoughts on that. Yeah, I guess. Well, I guess I'll ask you this question. That's what I was getting at there. So going into last year, I released the same exact video. I gave 10 bold predictions, and I think only half of them came right. But again, these are bold predictions for a reason. I want to ask you a question here. When you look back at last year's AFC South wide receivers, most notably on the Jags, What is a receiver that you think that I said was going to be an all-pro, having a career year there in Jacksonville?
Christian Kirk.
No, Christian. No, no, I love Christian Kirk actually, but no, Calvin Ridley going into last year, coming off that suspension. I said Calvin Ridley is going to be an all-pro wide receiver. All I'm getting at here is I hope that Garrett Wilson has a way better season and he's is a little bit more consistent than Calvin Ridley was for my prediction. But of course, Calvin Ridley's now in a new city. If Garrett Wilson wants to
Yeah,
leave, Cleveland's of
yeah.
course a good place for him to go.
Yeah, and honestly, I mean, dude, like Calvin Ridley was disappointing last year, man. And we talked about it before the season. We're like, man, he might have like 1,200 yards, 1,300 yards, and be absolutely great. But this dude like had the season, it had 1,000 yards receiving. It didn't feel like it. Like I think he
Oh,
went like 7 straight games, 8 straight games where he had under like 50 yards receiving or something terrible like that.
yeah, I mean, he had a great second half to the year, but a lot of that came on like some big splash plays.
Yeah.
Most notably when they went to London, I think he had a big game against the Bills there. But outside of that, Calvin Ridley was definitely my biggest miss of last season. Outside of also saying the Jags were going to be a 12-13 win football team. We're not going to talk about last season. Again, these are bold predictions for a reason. For me, you see Kyle Pitts on the screen, the second Gator so far on my bold predictions list. And I promise I didn't do that on purpose, right? That's just how it happened. But I think this year, with the addition of Kirk Cousins and how this offense is now going to be able to open up with Arthur Smith out the door, I think Kyle Pitts is going to be the biggest beneficiary of this new offensive coordinator and this new quarterback here in Atlanta. I think Kyle Pitts, not only does he finally prove that he was worth that top 5 selection, but he dominates. I think he's going to have 10 plus receiving touchdowns this year. Of course, bold predictions for a reason, but for reference, this is a guy that hasn't had more than 5 in a single season. I think he gets 10 this year. That's of course in the categories of your Travis Kelce's, your Sam Laporta from last year, your George Kittles of the world, Mark Andrews when he's healthy. That is elite status to get 10 in a single season. I think Kyle Pitts is going to be the guy to do it, especially because Kirk Cousins loves his tight ends, whether if it was back with Chris Cooley there in Washington or Jordan Reed in Washington, or of course when he made his way over to Minnesota, well, if it was Kyle Rudolph or then TJ Hawkinson for half a season. But of course, Kyle Pitts, I think it's destined for him to have an amazing season in 2024. But I guess I'll ask you that. Who do you think will be the biggest beneficiary? Do you think it will be Kyle Pitts? Do you think it'll be Bijan? Or of course, you think it'll be Drake London?
It'll definitely be Kyle Pitts. And
Yeah.
when Kyle Pitts first got drafted, I mean, looking at his tape, looking at how productive he was his last year, seeing how he completely boosted up Kyle Trask and making, Kyle Trask like a generational quarterback, which is crazy.
He made him
You
draftable.
know, exactly. And seeing how great this guy is, and he honestly checks all the boxes for a Hall of Fame tight end. We've been waiting for him to like truly get a quarterback to break past that potential. And so I think going into this year, man, he's going to absolutely ball out.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Now I have 3 more bold predictions for you, Amir, and I didn't tell you about these prior to the show, and of course, you guys at home are getting these as well. The Buffalo Bills, of course, we both had this bold prediction, but having them miss the playoffs is a bold prediction because still, even after all that they've lost this offseason, they're still the team favored to win the division according to most sports books. So again, if you're favored to win according to the sports books, and we have them missing the playoffs, I'd say that's a bold prediction. In the middle, you see Roschon Johnson. If you guys aren't familiar, this is a 4th-round rookie running back that was drafted last year out of Texas. He was the backup to Bijan Robinson there at Texas for a couple years. Right now, he's the backup running back there in Chicago with Khalil Herbert. Of course, Chicago brought in DeAndre Swift. But I think Roschon Johnson, with his talent and the flashes that he shown last year when he was healthy, I think he's going to take over this backfield, and he will end the season as the running back 1 in Chicago over a guy like DeAndre Swift, who they paid a lot of money to come in and be dominant. I think it'll be Roschon Johnson and not DeAndre Swift. And then for Terry McLaurin, you see, we've heard a lot of rumors about who, the trade market, who's going to get traded, where are they going to get traded. I don't think it'll be T. Higgins this year. I think if anything, Seattle or Cincinnati will just take their chances and let him walk. It won't be Brandon Ayuk because if they were going to trade him or Debo, I think that would have been on draft night. I think not. It won't be those guys. It'll be Terry McLaurin, which will be the receiver traded this season around the trade deadline. I was a big advocate for this last year, Amir. I was, every single week I was saying the Bills, you need to trade for Terry McLaurin to pair next to Stephon Diggs. Just give Josh Allen another dynamic weapon. Get rid of Gabe Davis, bring in Terry McLaurin. That didn't happen. So Terry McLaurin, I think this year he's unhappy with the situation around the midseason mark. I can't see this team having a 500 record. Maybe he just gets pushed over the edge and says, "Let me get out of here." So, but that is our bold predictions. Of course, we have a couple others that we could have had a bunch of other ones on this list. Another one that comes to mind, Amir, is Bryce Young. To me, I think will have a great bounce back season. But is that really a bold take? I think it's kind of hard to be worse than last year. I don't think Bryce Young is a bust. Of course, he can always bounce back. But now I want to ask you, Amir, I want you to go through either your bold takes or my bold takes. What is one that you want to dive deeper into here? Because we ran through ours here relatively quickly.
Yeah, so the one bold take I want to bring up, with you is that Jamar Chase bold take, that first one.
Interesting.
Yeah, yeah. And looking at how, it feels like the past 3 years, somebody has gotten close to hitting that 2,000-yard mark. Seeing how close Tyreek was, seeing how close, honestly, CD was on pace at a
He
point,
was.
to even get that close. And, seeing the way the Bengals are, Jamar Chase, being hurt last year, Joe Burrow being hurt, seeing them come back with the chip on their shoulder, especially if T. Higgins is gone. Now I'm expecting Jamar Chase to also hit that 2,000-yard mark or close to around 900 yards. And he's going to get completely fed this year, completely fed.
Yeah, no, that's something. Well, again, if you do the math, you break it down, you would have to average about 120 to 130 yards a game.
It's crazy.
Again, that's why Tyreek Hill was such a great answer last season because he's one of those guys that can, again, he can have 4 catches, but he can have 200 yards receiving.
Yeah.
And, of course, that helps your case. But again, if Tyreek Hill didn't get hurt last year, he was easily going to pass that number. But to me, again, like I mentioned earlier, whether it's T. Higgins getting traded, outside of T. Higgins, who else is going to take targets out of Jamar Chase's hands? I mean, Joe Mixon got traded this offseason, or I guess cut and then signed. But Joe Mixon's gone, and that's an extra 50 to 60 targets a year that's open in this offense. And I think at least 30 of them can go Jamar Chase's way. And Jamar Chase, of course, is such a talented receiver. But one that I want to talk about that you made here, of course, we know Patrick Mahomes is great. We know Rodgers. We have the same belief about that team. We talked a little bit about the philosophy and the possible schematic, I guess, plays and schemes that Arizona might run. I think they're going to be a running offense. I want to talk about Caleb Williams. And again, for Caleb Williams, this is a guy that, again, maybe the most talented prospect we've ever seen coming into a great situation. I want to ask you, it's not really a bold prediction, but I want to ask you, what is a failure of a season in your mind for a guy like Caleb Williams? Of course, he's coming in with all of this hype around him. Kind of, he has the same kind of hype and hype around him like a guy like Victor Wembanyama did going into the NBA, or of course other prospects we've seen that are no doubt the number one pick. What is a failure season for you for a guy like Caleb Williams? Let's say they missed the playoffs. Would that hypothetically be a failure season for you with all the talent around him?
I wouldn't say a failure. I mean, because at the end of the day, I'm not high on Eberflus or the coaches they have on staff, in Chicago. But for me, honestly, a failure for Caleb and this Bears team in general isn't to lose or to win less than 8 wins. And seeing this team, the way they finished the second half of the season and winning 7 games, despite them starting off terrible, despite them, struggling, and seeing them getting a dogfight, with a team like Detroit, a team like Cleveland last year. And, them showing those flashes, if they were to not win over 8 games, I think it'll be a failure season.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, that is interesting just because, again, he is a rookie quarterback, but with all the talent around him, I definitely can see it happening. I want to ask you about this Pittsburgh quarterback situation because I ran through it. I didn't ask you about your opinion. I want to ask you about this, though. For Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, both talented in their own right. Russell Wilson, arguably a Hall of Fame level quarterback for what he did there in Seattle. But your thoughts about the Pittsburgh quarterback room? Do you think one of these guys can be their guy in 2024 and beyond? Or do you think it'll be somewhere else, maybe in the draft or through a trade elsewhere?
So, I think this year, Russ is going to be their guy, but personally, I don't think it'll last long. I think, he might last until towards the end of the year. They might have some dysfunction, but, I think Russ will play, slightly above average. But like you mentioned earlier, I mean, their defense, honestly, might be the best in the league next year. I mean, they are loaded on defense. And so, I think for this Pittsburgh team, their defense is going to win them a bunch of games. Just like every year how last year, I mean, they won 10 games, because of their defense. They're going to be super competitive. But at the same time, I mean, this team is still stuck in this a gray area. I mean, like they're not going to win games until they can truly get, a next generational prospect. And if this was Russ straight out of Seattle, going straight to Pittsburgh, I think that would be great. But I think Russ has slightly declined since then. Being in Denver, he's going to a team where it's like, I mean, the only receiver they have is George Pickens, and personally, I don't think George Pickens could be a number one on a true contending team. And so, I think going into this year, they'll be solid. Probably around 10 wins or whatever, 9 wins or whatever. Could maybe squeeze into the playoffs as some injuries happen. Everything is perfect for them, but I think going into that next year, they'll be looking to move off from Russ.
My only this is the only thing you have to worry about if you're Steelers fans. Before we run to the comments, if TJ Watt's healthy, you guys win football games. I mean, that's really it. It doesn't matter if you got me back there playing quarterback. Whenever TJ Watt's playing for you guys, I think you guys win like 80% of the time. It's absolutely insane. Yeah. And last year, when he was hurt, you guys went on that big losing streak, or at least bad month and a half of football or so. But again, I guess I'm just not the biggest believer. I guess again, Russell Wilson's going to be a solid quarterback. He's going to be 25 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, kind of like he did last year in Denver. I have no doubt that he's going to be a solid guy for them and a guy that's going to be a game manager and win them games. But I just don't know about their future. And that was really the bold prediction, kind of like your Dak Prescott one, where you have him going to Miami. I don't think either of these guys will be the guy for them from 2024 and beyond. But we're Browns fans, Amir. Before we get out of here and before we run through our quick little recap, I got to get a bold prediction out of you from the Cleveland Browns this year, whether it's offensively, defensively, on a player perspective. What is your bold prediction for the Cleveland Browns this year? Again, I'll give you mine as well.
So for my bold prediction, I haven't put too much thought into it.
Yeah, it's definitely on the spot.
Yeah, definitely, but actually, I got two. It's not bold, but I think outside of Rodgers, Nick Chubb is going to push him the most for that comeback player of the year. I think
Absolutely.
That's one.
I think he should.
Exactly, and for that second one, I'm expecting Deshaun to throw around 35 touchdowns this year, around there.
Wow. Now, again, I said this on the fantasy episode on Tuesday. Of course, it's typically going to be on Monday going forward. But I said that we don't need MVP Watson. We need Flacco Watson. That's the best way that I could summarize it, because if he could just take his checkdowns, protect the football, I think we're going to win a lot more games than people think, especially with how great our defense is. But if I had to come up with a bold prediction, you kind of took it from me with that Nick Chubb one. I think, I'm seeing a lot of disrespect towards Nick Chubb just because of the injury. I see a lot of people not even having him as a top 10 running back anymore because of this injury. And that's possible. Again, running backs are, running backs are, again, they get beat up a lot. So injuries like that could definitely be devastating and career altering. But not many running backs are built like Nick Chubb.
Right.
Not as many running backs are as strong and as durable as Nick Chubb. So again, without these freak injuries, Nick Chubb has been dominant. And last year, going into the year, we had a legitimate argument. Is he the best running back in the league? And of course, CMC kind of ran away with that title. But I think this year he can get back into that top 3 category. But if I had to come up with a bold prediction, I'd say, again, a bold prediction for the Browns is that we stay healthy. But if I had to come up with a bold prediction, I'll say Jerry Jeudy. Even though I'm not the biggest believer in him, I'll say he bounces back and he shows us some flashes. Maybe we get a 800 to 1,000 yard receiving a season out of Jerry Jeudy, which he hasn't even hit that mark yet in his career. But again, I'm just excited. Hopefully, that's not really a bold prediction. I'll say this. I'll say the Browns are an 11-win football team this year. I'll say we're an 11-win football team, but I think that will ultimately be a wild card spot. But that's more so of a bold prediction if I had come up with one. So before we leave the show, just to remind the people at home, Amir, you gave us about 6 different bold predictions. Please list off those 6 bold predictions and go into it if you want to. If not, of course, just briefly hover over it.
Yeah, so for my first bold prediction, I believe Tua is going to play his way out of Miami. I think Miami's, was super dysfunctional last year. You obviously saw Mike McDaniel and saw everybody, the whole entire coaching staff, going to different pro days, looking at other quarterbacks, in the draft. And so, I think Tua's going to struggle this year, kind of, be dysfunctional again, take a step back. I think this Miami team might get bounced in the first round and really see, they need a different change at quarterback. And so, for my second bold prediction, I have the Chiefs getting their first ever three-peat. This is honestly crazy to think about, but it's not crazy to imagine because it's Kansas City. And, seeing Mahomes win last year with that terrible roster, with that terrible receiving core, I believe everything's in a perfect spot for them to really come out and break that, break that record and be the first team to three-peat. And so, for my third prediction, I got Aaron Rodgers coming back, winning comeback player of the year, shocking everybody, maybe throwing around 35 touchdowns, elevating this team in general and leading to the playoffs. And, it's crazy to see, a lot of different fans right off this Jets team, which is crazy to me. And me and Owen's been talking about this, the past months now. The defense is already elite. I mean, they won 7 games with a terrible quarterback at quarterback, them starting multiple different quarterbacks, them having no receivers outside of Garrett Wilson. But you add in Mike Will, you got Brees Hall coming back, you boost the old line up, and you got Aaron Rodgers come back. And so I think this team's going to go to the playoffs easily. And so for my fourth one, this one is probably, the most bold one I have because, getting around 1,500 yards as a rookie is absolutely insane. Breaking past 105 receptions as a rookie is insane. But, looking at the Cardinals team, seeing that Kyler has nobody else to throw to, I believe Marvin Harrison, is going to break one of those 2 records, either receptions or yards. I believe he's going to come out, dominate, and ball out. And so for my 5th one, I got Caleb breaking basically every Bears passing record, which isn't much. He's going to break that, that 2,200-yard passing record for the Bears, that 17 touchdown, passing record for the Bears. And, I think him as a rookie quarterback, he's going to break that 31, passing touchdown NFL record, which Herbert set a few years back. I'm not going to go as far and say he's going to throw around 4,500 yards and break that record. But, I think he's going to break that passing TD record, so lead his team to the playoffs. I'm thinking about, a 7 or a 6 seed. And so for my 6th one, I got Garrett Wilson being an all-pro receiver. We kind of touched on it. Last year, I want to say the second team was A.J. Brown, Mike Evans, Brandon Ayuk, and somebody else. I forgot who else. But, I think Garrett Wilson, is really going to boost his game up. And the fact that he had 1,000 yards receiving in back-to-back years, as a rookie and as a year 2 player with having, a bunch of quarterbacks starting, him having a dysfunctional team starting, and he's getting Aaron Rodgers back, a guy that's going to throw 30-plus touchdowns, 4,000-plus yards, a guy that's going to completely ball out this year. And the fact that they boosted the offensive line up, and, they added Mike Wood to kind of take the stress off of him, getting bracketed and getting, truly schemed against. I think it's a perfect spot for him to truly have a breakout year.
Absolutely. Moving over to mine, I have about 9 of them, but again, we'll run through these relatively fast. Jamar Chase, I think he's going to become the first ever receiver to have 2,000 yards in a single season. Last year, I was close with Tyreek. This year, I think Jamar Chase could be the guy to do it. And number 2, Anthony Richardson will finish as a top 5 MVP candidate. Amir, we're both big fans on the Colts. I think they make the playoffs. And if he can, whether if it's with his legs or with his arm, Anthony Richardson can be a dynamic finish as a top 5 MVP candidate. And number 3, the Jets, not only do they win their division, which could be a bold take as it is, depending on the sports books, but I think they also finished as a top 2 seed. This roster has everything. I'm worried about their coach, but I think they could be a Super Bowl contender. And number 4, Laiatu Latu, my favorite prospect in the class. I think not only does he dominate from day 1 in Indy, but he breaks the rookie sack record currently held by Javon Curse. Little fun fact there for you guys. But I think the current line is at 14.5. So Laiatu Latu, I think, can dominate with the attention given to DeForest Buckner, and he can have around 15 sacks in his rookie year, and he would be the defensive rookie of the year as well. I think at number 5, Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, neither of them will be the guy going forward for Pittsburgh. Both of them will kind of be okay this year. The defense will carry them to a 9-10 win record. But again, they're going to be in the quarterback market yet again after Big Ben's departure. And number 6, Kyle Pitts is going to have 10-plus receiving touchdowns this year. He has the quarterback. He now has the offensive coordinator, new head coach. This is the year to do it. It's time to live up to that number 4 overall pick. And number 7, the Buffalo Bills missed the playoffs. As of right now, they're still favored to win their division, according to the sports books. And to say they're missing the playoffs, I'd say that's a pretty bold take. And number 8, it's not going to be Brandon Ayuk. It's not going to be T. Higgins, 2 guys that are in trade rumors. It's going to be Scary Terry McLaurin. That's going to be traded this upcoming year. Maybe they start below 500. We know he's kind of frustrated with the situation. I can see him going to a team maybe like the Buffalo Bills. And number 9, it's a minor bold take, but I think Roschon Johnson, even after the Bears paid DeAndre Swift all that money, he's going to take over and be the running back 1 by the season's end for the Chicago Bears. But Amir, that is episode 173. A bunch of bold takes for you guys here. Just about 15 to 20 of them with everything that we dived into here on today's show. But again, we just passed 17.5 thousand subscribers. Channel continues to grow, and of course, some opportunities with BR might be coming up here. But Amir, any last thoughts before we get out of here? We have a lot of interesting schedule predictions starting next week and going for the next couple.
We have a lot of what ifs coming up, and I see those are probably the most exciting for me because you kind of look back 3 months from now, 4 months from now, and you look back and you're like, man, like I really had this prediction. Like it's no way, this is happening right now. And so, and obviously, our rankings as well, for our teams, some stuff is going to be accurate. Some stuff is going to completely shock us. Some teams are going to completely fall apart. Some teams might have a breakout year, kind of like how the Colts had last year. And so I'm excited.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think last year, I'd have to go back and look, but I think I had Myles Garrett as the defensive player of the year. Again, not really a bold take, but it came true. My Super Bowl mirror was the Eagles and the Bengals. We know how that fell
That's
apart
crazy.
for both different teams. A lot of them didn't come true. The craziest one, Amir, was that I said that the Rams were going to struggle and that Sean McVay was going to retire.
That was crazy.
That was crazy. But again, that was a pipe dream because I thought the Browns were going to struggle. So that was my pipe dream, was that maybe Stefanski gets let go and we bring in Sean McVay. But Stefanski, again, had a pretty good season. But again, episode 173, we appreciate you for joining the show, and maybe we'll see you next week more than once.